Hey everyone, I'm Breanna from Boom and welcome to Boom Chat. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with AC Esguerra, the acclaimed independent comics creator who is bringing you 80 Days. Jay wants nothing more than to fly, or so he thinks, until he crosses paths with a mysterious thief named Fix, whose tricks and charms draw him into the struggle against the looming aviation guild to which Jay owes his very being. As Jay becomes further entangled in the turbulence of Fix's cause, each man must learn to navigate shifting allegiances, the fight for freedom, and the greatest adventure of all, love. Oh, AC. Okay, all right. This book is gorgeous and breathtaking and beautiful. And the story and the way that you wrote it and illustrated it, like it just like tugs at your heartstrings. And I'm just, oh my gosh, I'm gushing because it's amazing. I would like to know what inspired you to write this beautiful queer historical romance, and can you tell us about the process of creating your first original graphic novel?
Yeah, so around the time this idea started coming into being, I was reading a lot of pilot autobiographies from the golden age of flight between the 1920s, 1930s. I've always had like a love of history and flight anyway, so I was like, let's go to the source. And I was really taken by the way these pilots wrote about the craft of flying and how it was both practical because technology wasn't as good back then. It was very much a matter of survival and instinct sometimes to get out of trouble. But it was also sometimes their writing was very romantic too. And I just really loved that and connected to that mysteriousness of flying. So that was a big inspiration for the writing of the story. Visually, I was looking at a lot of movies that I love, like Studio Ghibli's Porco Rosso, which is about a pilot, and also a lot of black and white Hollywood movies like Casablanca, Roman Holiday. All of these things kind of came together, and I really wanted to tell a beautiful story in that kind of time and place too. But I wanted to do it with people who were, traditionally overlooked or sidelined by those narratives. So yeah, I wanted to make the art that I loved and was so captivated by, like, Love Me Back.
It is beautiful and so well executed. And it's so wonderful to see a story like this set in a time period where those people wouldn't have gotten to be like put on this pedestal of like being the main character and finding love. And it's
Absolutely.
gorgeous. And I'm so excited for the people who are going to read it, who are going to see themselves in it. And so I think that is such a gift that you have given to readers. And I'm just, again, thrilled. All right. So I know that you started this as a short comic, but did you always envision yourself telling the full story as a graphic novel, or did creating the short story open the door for the longer story?
I created the short story, but I always wanted to make something long. Yeah, okay, so every year I go to my family's and we watch all of the Lord of the Rings, the extended ones. So that should tell you something. I love long form. I love like getting to know characters over a long arc, all their ups and downs. So, and I love slow burn in romance. So I kind of knew it was gonna become a long thing. I didn't kind of realize how long, but I think the story ended up being exactly what it was meant to be.
That's amazing. I was sitting there reading, I was like, you could have made this longer. And like, I still would have just like been in there, like, what is going to happen? This is amazing. Like, and the pages are just so rich, and like the way that they flow is just like a painting. And it is visually stunning. So, okay. Okay, so AC, I have to say that the world building that you've done here is just fantastic. The story just takes off running from the start. We're immediately pulled into this world that you've built and created for us. I would like to know, what were some of the fictional and real life influences that you pulled from when you were creating and designing the setting of the story?
Right. So a lot of the settings are real places that are based on real places that appear in the travels of pilots from the 30s in their writings. And they write about these places, like various locations in Europe and North Africa, especially for this story, Italy and North Africa, Morocco. Um, they write about it with such romanticism and adventure, but I wanted to go beyond that and kind of really research, the culture and the history of these countries and cities, the architecture, the landscapes. So I was looking at all of those things and just trying to create references to these places that were beautiful and part of the story in that way.
And you were so successful, because I'm like flipping through the pages going, well, not flipping through the pages, I write it on my computer, but that's not, anyway. But I'm like looking at these pages and I'm like, I want to stay at a hotel here. I want to visit these towns. These are gorgeous. I want to have like a glass of wine here. Like, it looks amazing. Okay, so the next part that really stood out to me in your graphic novel that's different from other ones that I've read is the narration style. It's so unique. You're telling this story through journaling, and you did this like awesome thing where the dialogue is just like notes passed back and forth between the two main characters, and it just made it feel like really intimate, and it really drew you in, like you were getting a piece of these characters that like no one else is allowed to see, which I thought was so lovely. What made you think of writing it this way?
Well, I guess the short way of answering this is that it just seemed to emerge naturally from, the inspiration of real life, like pilot logbooks. They really did write like these like logbooks that were full of like, their short clipped sentences about just mechanical stuff and weather stuff, things they need to know. But other times when I guess they had more time to write, they would become very lyrical and talking about, the clouds, or like, thoughts that they were having about what it was like to be so far above the rest of the world, etc. So that kind of writing influenced Jay's voice, especially the way that he writes in this very stoic way and kind of holds back a lot. But the things that he doesn't say maybe are revealed with the image, right, in the panels. Mm-hmm. So the text and image kind of work together that way to reveal how he really feels. And then Fix is kind of the same way. He's completely different. He's this ingenue, super curious, super energetic, super prone to getting in trouble. And when he writes to Jay, he kind of brings out Jay's honesty and sort of like unlocks his heart and makes him say what he's really thinking about things, right? So I don't know. I love writing dialogue, especially between super different characters, and especially if they're like slowly getting attracted to each other. It's super fun. So it just seemed like that was the way to get into their conversation and their developing feelings.
I loved it. All of those like little looks and like the lines that got crossed out, where it was like you can see what they're really thinking, and they're like, nope, can't say that, gonna adjust. And I just thought it was really sweet, and it just reminded me of, like when I first met my partner. Like I was just like, oh my gosh, like, you just get so excited, and just it's those little like glances that you stuck in there and those like side eye looks that I was like, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, I would be lying if I said that my own relationship didn't have an influence on it too.
Oh, yay. I love seeing creators who really put themselves into their stories, because it really just adds something extra special to each story, and we get to learn so much about them. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to know is you illustrated this 300 plus page book. My goodness. How are your hands and your wrists? Are you okay?
They're okay. They're fine.
Okay. All right.
I got physical therapy and like my rubber bands and all that stuff. I haven't worked out for my wrist.
Okay. Cool. Because like I noticed that it's done traditionally versus digitally, and that you use a lot of watercolor I would like to know what made you choose watercolor for your style, and also that cover is gorgeous and beautiful and everything, and everybody needs it up on a wall.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's right there. It was just personal preference. I've always really liked traditional media, just feeling like the texture of the paper and like watching the water and pigment sink in and mix in front of you. That kind of makes me feel like really calm and connected with the art. I can work digitally too, and a lot of times I work both traditionally and digitally. But for this story, it really made sense to me because of the black and white aesthetic. The way that the ink looks on Bristol paper really does remind me of like the look of nitrate film, the way that light falls and the texture of film. So yeah, that was why.
So you use Bristol versus watercolor paper.
Yeah. So the cover is done with watercolor on Arch's watercolor paper, but
Yeah.
all the interior pages are ink on Bristol.
Wow. I'm impressed because I used to be an art school kid, and I'm just like, whoo, Bristol, it's so soft and like smooth. You really got to know like where you're putting stuff down. Woo, wow. All right. That is a fun piece of information for me personally.
Yeah, for all the art nerds out there.
On Bristol. Wow. Okay. So again, with this story, the heart really truly lies with these amazing characters that you've created. You just can't help but fall in love with them along on their journey. And it's impossible for like the reader to not root for them, even when they're on opposing sides. Like I'm over here rooting for Sable, even though like I'm just like, girl, what are you doing? But like, not to spoil anything, but you know, things happen later, and I'm like, Sable's my jam. But also you're literally rooting for all of them. You want all of them to do well. So I would like to know, what was it like for you creating these really complex and rich characters? And what were some of the influences that you pulled from for their character designs?
What was it like? Well, sometimes I felt I was not so much creating them as meeting them.
I love that.
Obviously I set, the personalities, and I, had written the outline of the plot. So I knew what I was going to put them through, right? But it was only by working through the story and like moving through their emotional journeys with them that, I kind of started to really understand like, oh, this is what would make you angry. Like, this is how you would react in this situation. Like, this is how you would hold a pencil. This is how you would hold a cup. Like, it was really somewhere between like directing a performance of actors, I guess, but also just observing and witnessing and listening to what the characters had to say and like revealing themselves to me. I feel like I learned things from them. Is that weird?
That's not weird at all. Like, that's amazing. I love that. They took on a life of their own.
Yeah. And then as far as influences on the character design goes, they're not, based on anybody in real life in particular. I will say that Jay and Fix were originally based on some old character designs I had of a pilot blue jay and a thief fox. So some of those traits like kind of carried over to their human designs, like Jay's hair. So there's
And
that.
so wait, I noticed that there's a little cartoon that you put in there that they were reading. Is that the cartoon?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So you can see a little glimpse of their super old historic character designs. The rest of it was just like personal preferences, elegant clothes, androgynous people, women in suits. These are just things that I really like. It was important to me to make sure that these characters did not look like maybe what people typically expect the heroes of these types of stories to look like. And they're all short. I'm a short person. It's like we can kill it too. This takes place in an alternate timeline, but I'm very much talking about a queer Asian immigrant experience. And it was important to me that the character designs reflect that.
Oh, and they're so beautiful, and they're just, you just want to hug all of them. And I love all of their hairstyles and just all of their little, like, you really thought about all of the different aspects of the characters. Like, you can clearly see when you were reading this book that you thought about everything, and it shows. And it's just such a beautiful story. It's a beautiful graphic novel. I cannot wait for fans and readers to pick this up and just dive into it and love all over it as much as we have. So with that, AC, I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's been just such a pleasure and a delight getting to chat with you. And for those of you watching at home, be sure to pick up 80 Days in stores now. If you want to stay up to date on all of our amazing content, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click that notification button.